Welcome all. Thank you very much for joining this Meet the Candidates webinar, and a particular welcome to our candidates in this year's election. For those of you that may not have met me before, my name is David Buckle. I'm Head of Membership Engagement at Nominet, and it's my privilege just to facilitate this session today. In a second, I'm going to ask each of the candidates to introduce themselves, but firstly, just a reminder of where we are and why we run this process. So there's one elected non-exec director position available this year. You may be aware in total there are 4 positions on the board for elected non-exec directors. This is done by a member vote. It's a weighted vote and it's done under the single transferable vote system, and there's details online if you want to understand how that works. And this is really the final step before voting opens on the 20th of September. And then voting runs until the 13th of October. We do all the adding up, and then the results are communicated shortly afterwards. It's a 3-year appointment for this elected position, and the successful candidate takes up their role following the AGM. So at the end of the AGM, when all that business is completed, that's when their role starts. So the purpose of today is for our members to have a chance to engage with the candidates, to ask them some questions, to see what our candidates are thinking and where they might be trying to influence the board going forward. So that's it from me. Just one final thing to remind people, we will be recording this session. We are recording this session. Now we'll be putting it live on the hub as soon as we can after the session for those that are unable to join. But please don't make a recording yourself. We don't have consent from our candidates or guests for others to record. That's it from me, other than posing some questions. So the format, we're just about to start. I'm going to invite each of the candidates to make a few opening statements. We're then going to go into a kind of group session. I've got some pre-submitted questions from our members, and then I'll open it up to members to ask additional questions. We are going to try and keep our candidates on track timing-wise, just keep this fair, but very much I'm going to try and make sure we can hear from them. And we will finish at 3:30, or if we've exhausted questions, then we'll stop before. That's it. So I'm now going to ask the candidates to unmute themselves. And if I can have it in this bit with, I'll invite you, Thomas, to start, then followed by David, and then by Steve. So Thomas, you have the microphone. Welcome.
Thank you so much. And hi, everybody. My name is Thomas Rickert. And I'm going to give you a little bit of a background on me in case you haven't read the papers. I'm 54 years old and I live in Bonn, Germany with my wife and our 3 children. I'm a lawyer, which is an expertise that I think complements the expertise represented on the board currently quite nicely. I'm managing partner of Rickert Law Firm, which is a law firm based in Germany specializing in questions of the digital economy. For some 25 years, I've been advising internet infrastructure providers on a variety of legal issues, but my focus always has been the domain industry. I've been advising both CCTLD registries, GTLD registries, registrars, and resellers on disputes, contractual and policy matters. In addition to my work as a lawyer, I'm director of the so-called Names and Numbers Forum with the Internet Industry Association ECO. That is a special interest group of those members of the ECO Association that are active in the domain industry. It's like 150 members or something. ECO's members have around 70% of all domain names under management worldwide. And I try to take good care of them by being active at ICANN, putting out papers, organizing workshops and events, as well as producing statements on matters such as GDPR, NIS2, DNS abuse, and others. Additionally, I'm on the GNSO Council representing the ISPCP, and I will start my 4th term in total on the council this fall at the AGM. And I've been a GNSO liaison to the CCNSO when I served on the GNSO Council several years back. Talking about CCTLDs, I'm also a member of the Domain Advisory Council with NIC AT as they call it, International Domain Expert. Additionally, I have board expertise both in the commercial as well as in the non-for-profit world. For 3 years, I've been president of the InHope Association, which is a network of hotlines or tip lines fighting CSAM online. And you know the IWF, Nominet supports the IWF, which is a member of that organization. Until recently, I've been an NED on Centralnick's board. For more than 9 years since CentralNic's IPO in 2013, I've helped the organization grow and thrive, and you as members of the industry will have witnessed that. Finally, I'm a member of the advisory board of a stock company listed in Germany, but that's in a totally different industry. As you can see, I bring decades of relevant expertise to the table, a lot of registries and registrars entrust me with their legal matters, yet I'm totally independent. My different roles allow for me to be on top of developments in the market, as well as from a policy and regulatory perspective. Why am I applying for this job? Actually, it brings me joy to do different things. And where I am at the moment with my law firm, I have 10 associates working for me, so I'm pretty flexible in managing my time. Nominet went through tumultuous times, and I think that I'm pretty good at bringing people together. For example, I've chaired huge working groups with 200 plus people at ICANN with pretty diverging views. And my strength is to listen, understand, and help bridge gaps and find consensus. Stability is key for a critical infrastructure provider such as Nominet, and I will play a vital part in ensuring that. Thank you.
Thomas, thank you very much. David.
Hello, so I'm David Thornton. I'm going to be brief here. I've been on the Nominet board twice before. I'm a domain investor, and I work with Name Account Inc., which buys and sells domain names. I spend a lot of time working with domain investors in the community, and I think I'd make a great candidate to continue the good work of Nominet. Thank you.
Thank you, David. And Steve.
Well, good afternoon all. Just looking through the list of people that have attended today. I think everyone probably does know me. So hi, I'm Steve Wright. I spent the last 25 years or so in the internet infrastructure industry. Started out in the late 90s building really bad websites. Turns out you can make a bit of money at that time because all websites were bad. So, but that wasn't the best path for me. I discovered I was a lot better at building infrastructure companies, particularly in the data center, hosting, and cloud space, as well as network service providers. In my executive career, most recently I was COO at RedCentric, which is an AIM-listed technology services firm. That was following the sale of my previous company, 4D Data Centers, in June of last year. I've actually now stepped away from that business. I'm providing independent consultancy and advisory to a variety of different businesses. On my non-executive side, many of you will have known that I spent 9 years at the Links, the London Internet Exchange, which is the world's largest membership-based internet exchange point. And through my time there, I acted as both deputy chair, and the elected senior independent director. And importantly, I think one of the most relevant parts, I took Links through quite a significant governance change, modernizing the articles, modernizing the board, and really driving the organization forwards. In addition to that, I was part of the Data Center Council at Tech UK. So that's Tech UK is somewhat a lobbying group, a trade association for much of the UK technology industry. And through COVID, I was sharing many of the data center operator calls and liaising with government on how to ensure that we had the strongest possible response to ensure everyone stayed connected and data centers being built and operated. So why would I ask for your vote to stand on the Nominet board? Well, I think, as Thomas said, Nominet's been through a bit of a rough period, and we've had the successful EGM, but it was marginal. And one of the big things I believe is that Nominet should get back to being the world-leading CCTLD. It's been there before, and I remember it through the early and mid-2000s, where both on a technological side and a policy side, .uk was revered around the world. I think it's slipped back slightly. I think we need to have those ambitions again to be the world-leading CCTLD. I've got lots of board experience and a whole variety of different traits, but probably the biggest aspect is ensuring that we can build the systems and process in the boardroom that drives policy and decision making, and ensures that the executive have very clearly defined boundaries about where they're operating and the direction of travel. Likewise, it's really important that we communicate that out to the membership. And I've shown that through the Links governance changes that I performed, I got almost 99% support from the membership there. So I'm bringing the experience of both my executive and commercial career, as well as my other not-for-profit experience to the Nominet board. Thank you.
Thank you all very much. So starting off then with the first question that's been pre-submitted from our members. Obviously, people will be aware that one of the current activities is the review of the articles. So there are two questions in one here. Which of the changes from the current proposals do you support? And then going further than that, would you like to see additional changes embedding into our articles? And if I can ask you to do this one in the order of David, Steve, and Thomas. So two questions. What do you support of the current proposals, and anything you would like to see in the future beyond the current consultation?
I was broadly supportive of the articles changes that were there. I had nothing to really find there was anything too problematic with it. I was of the opinion, though, that it's still too early for me to make my decision on what might become in the future. So I'm waiting to see what comes of the consultation first before I make any further comments on that. Thank you.
Thanks, David. Steve.
Yeah, I think I'm broadly in support, and people who've saw Thomas and I at the London Domain Summit, I think we're broadly in support of making sure the articles are staying current and up to date. As I pointed out, I think it's been long overdue that the board hasn't sort of tackled this nettle. And it's been, I think, at this point, we're doing a lot of tidying work and updating of nomenclature and language. I think there's a more important aspect of going that next phase about where the membership would like to see the organization. For me, that future aspect is, I think we really need to look at the objects of the organization. I think we've seen historically that they might be slightly too wide, as we saw with the whole Siglass debacle and commercialization attempts. Nominet should be true to its purpose in that regard. So I think we need to find a way that doesn't necessarily restrict Nominet to only just being .uk, but also ensuring that there are the guards in place to stop it being totally expansive.
Thank you. And Thomas.
Yeah, well, a couple of thoughts. When I read the proposed changes, there's nothing that stood out as being odd or something that I couldn't support. Yet, I think that my role as a board member of a member organization is somewhat different. So I consider myself the shepherd of the view or the wishes that the members might hold, right? So we need to make sure that we have a proper framework that serves as the basis for excellent corporate governance. We have to certainly take care of the fiduciary duties that we have as directors. But other than that, we should listen to what the members want us to do. To be perfectly honest, I think that the voting is pretty complicated. So I'm usually a fan of transparent and easy rules that everyone can understand, because that helps an organization being accessible and not appear like it's dominated by the views of some that might have more influence than others. But with all these member organizations, there's a history to what you have, and I think it would be inappropriate for me to step in and say that certain concepts that you've been using are not valid. So it's not an against, but that's maybe an area where there's room for improvement for the sake of transparency. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. Segues us quite nicely into the next member submitted question. It's been mentioned a couple of times, the views of members, and of course, Nominet's membership is a quite broad membership. And so one of the questions that's been submitted is, in particular, why should smaller registrar members vote for each of the particular candidates? And if I could ask this to be taken in the order of Steve, David, and Thomas. Sorry to have you last again, Thomas, but you'll catch up, I'm sure, at some point during the order of questioning. So, Steve, if you could I'll pick that one up first, please. So why should smaller registrars in particular vote for you?
So I think we have to remember that there's members that might only be classed as small in the terms of domains under management or as such, but actually could be very, very large organizations. So I think there's a consideration there about ensuring there's the appropriate input for the size of organization. But in terms of the smaller members as such, smaller members, I don't really like that term. Members that are at a different commercial scale, potentially. I think it's important that we can show value for the members. Right now, if you speak to 95% of the members, the only reason they are a member of Nominet is to become a registrar and get a discount on the domain. And that's the only reason they're there. I think we need to show some wider value in that membership offering to deliver that value both across what we'll class as the smaller members, but also the larger members as well. I think Nominet can do a lot more in that area.
Thank you. David.
Well, I think you should vote for the candidate that you feel fits the criteria that you want for a candidate of the board. But certainly I am a domain registrar, small domain registrar. And I do have a lot in common with a lot of the other smaller registrars. And I've been through this and I understand how the system works and understand how the company works. I understand what's important to people like us. I'm heavily interested in the idea that Nominet gives us some promotions, and that's what I would be advocating for. So if that's something you want, maybe you should think about voting for me. Thank you.
Thomas.
Yeah, well, actually, when I first heard the question, I thought the question was more like, why should small registrars partake in the election at all, regardless of what candidate that would be? And maybe that could be the starting point for me to give you or offer an answer. Nominet is a critical infrastructure, and as such, it is an important voice when it comes to the question of how the governance of the internet is going to be in the years to come. Also, what regulation there will be in years to come. Whether we manage to keep a registry independent of content regulation as a technical function. And in order for an organization such as Nominet to be successful in conveying its position and maintaining a certain status, providing for the security, stability, and resilience of the DNS, it needs to have legitimacy. And for a member organization to have legitimacy, it's good for members to actually chime in. And you can opt for whatever candidate you like, but it's important that you place your vote and that you show that you do care, because as we see almost daily in news media, democracy and your voice actually being heard is pretty fragile, and we should make sure that Nominet is as a strong organization as can be. And I've put in my application because I think that I'm the best candidate that you can find. I have not come with a special mission to get you cheaper prices or change the organization overnight. And I think it would be a pretty conceited view to be taken by a non-executive whose influence, quite honestly, is limited in the overall concept of governance. Nonetheless, I will do my best, and this is why you should vote for me, to make the organization stable, to make sure that it can actually cope with all the massive changes that it has undergone, and that there is excellence all around, so that it can be a best-in-class example of how a CCTLD registry is operated, but also how the GTLD-related services that it's offering are actually being performed. So keep your vote for me.
Thank you. So quite a few questions coming now, which is great. I'm going to weave those in rather than because I think they come quite nicely into what we're talking about here. So there's a number of questions starting to develop about members and engaging with members. So a question here: how will you work both within Nominet and with members to improve and enhance member engagement? What would you champion for internally within Nominet that should be happening to engage members? And Steve, this one's coming to you first. I'll just repeat that. So we'll do Steve, Thomas, and then David on this one. So how will you work within Nominet and with members to improve and enhance member engagement? What would you champion for internally within Nominet that should be happening to engage members? Steve?
So the first thing needs to be a very clear strategy on how we want to engage with members. I think we have to, from a board level, it's important to actually set out that strategy in a clear manner and present that back to the membership to say, okay, we've come up with this plan. What's your feedback? How can we improve it? And if we look on the community, there's been feedback about events and the such. From my time at Links, we used to run quarterly events, which would get anywhere between 200 and 300 people attending regularly. So having a good program of events with enough notice and far enough in advance, I think is really important for bringing the membership together. I think there's also, from a board level direction, we need to resource it appropriately. It can't just be David and his team going every now and again, oh, can we have some funds to do an event, or to do some outreach, or put on some more localized events, or meet the members at events where they are already going. It needs to have a proper funded plan behind it, and that needs to be very clear and transparent as well. Finally, I think from the aspect of the community, we need to foster the community as not just a place for members to discuss Nominet itself, but the wider industry as well. I think there's a lot of great sharing of information that happens in many other organizations. I don't see that with Nominet and the community at the present time. I think we need to make that environment a lot more encouraging for people to join in. I think we need to ensure there's salient discussion points. And I think we also need to get the whole spectrum of members involved. I know, as I said earlier, that sort of 95% of members are only engaged because they get their discount on domains. I think we need to try and flip that on its head a little bit and show them the other values of being a member of an organization that has 2,500 members that are all working in similar spaces.
Thank you, Steve. Thomas?
Yeah, thanks very much. I should start by saying that Nominet is already pretty good in its member engagement. I think you are in a privileged situation as Nominet members to have an organization that you're a member of that is putting a lot of efforts in working with its members, hearing out the views of the members, and communicating with members. So I think that, compared to a lot of other TLDs, that is already quite advanced. So congratulations on that. That doesn't mean that there is no room for improvement. And I think that, when we're talking about member engagement, what do we need that for? I mean, it's not engaging for the sake of engaging and in order to have kumbaya moments all over the place, but it's because there are issues. And the issues primarily arise, as far as I can tell, from a lack of transparency about what an organization is doing and why the organization is doing that. Because that creates a disconnect and potentially a distrust. And you want to avoid that. And that's why you want to engage with members in order to make sure that you take them on board. And even though they might not support and understand, support every decision that might be taken, at least they should understand why you arrived where you did arrive, right? And I think that that is an aspect that can be worked on. For example, the board minutes, you're publishing board minutes, which is great, but a lot more thinking has gone into the board deliberations than can be seen from these minutes. And I think that you can, you can be try a tad more transparency with that, and just include a little bit of rationale as to why the board arrived with a certain way to deal with things. Maybe even capture diverging views inside the board so that the community understands that their views, which might be the ones that didn't make it to the resolution, were heard and discussed, right? So I think that's an easy way without investing too much more resources, but just by documenting the work that's been done at the board level. Another thing would be the Members Hub, which I think is a great place to be to exchange written views. But if you look at the substance and the tone of the messages exchanged there, it's not always a pleasant place to be in, to be quite honest. So I think that reading in that community on the various topics, you can sense what topics are more controversial than others. And I think that exchanging written views is not always the best vehicle to advance the discussion. And I would offer to take some of those discussions to the next level by offering either webinars, listening sessions, or even face-to-face meetings. Those can be combined with other meetings that already take place, but to make sure that members get the opportunity to make their voice heard. And I would understand my role, at least in part, as being a conduit of the information that comes from the member to the board deliberations. So I guess it's little things such as that could really make a difference. I think that we have a lot of the tools at our fingertips. We should just take them to the next level and use them properly.
Thank you. And David, you have the last one on this one.
So I also think Nominet does pretty well with member engagement, and I don't think it's up to the organization to try and make people engage who don't want to engage at all or any more than they actually do. I think if people want to engage, they will. And it is accepted that a lot of people are just members because they want the discount, and they'll engage when they want to do that. Nominet offers a great number of events around the country. It already offers webinars. It's got a much better forum than it ever did have. The webinars are great. One of the things with webinars, I think I'd like to see them transcripted, because I don't think a lot of people want to sit through a recording of a 2-hour webinar which has been broadcast necessarily. They'd rather just skim through the text. And I think it would be useful if Nominet could investigate techniques in doing that. But my door's always been open for people to contact me by email or any other method, and I've always been able to make myself available to talk to members if they want to, and I would continue to do that. And I think other than that, there's not a lot else you can do. Thank you.
Thank you, David. I've had a request from Leslie that I say who the questions come from. I absolutely will, Leslie. It would help me if some of the questions come through, they don't have a name on, in which case I won't read it. But if you'd like me to say who's asked it, then please, if you could put that in the chat as well. But David, I'll come to you first on this sort of follow-up question, which is really around the sort of number of members. So as a member-led organisation, what should Nominet be doing to get more members, and what issues do you feel are stopping Nominet from getting more members?
It's a multifaceted issue, because we pretty much accept why people are here to be members, and there's nothing wrong with that. And on that basis, Nominet shouldn't be going out of its way to encourage people to be members if they don't want to be. There's no reason to be a member if there's no reason to be a member, and trying to make anything of that, anything more of that, I don't think you should. That would only change if the fundamentals of the organization changed, and that's a bigger picture discussion that really is not going to be covered in a 20-second conversation here. So I can't add to that, I'm afraid.
Thank you, Thomas.
Yeah, I think it's of little to no value to try to get more members for the sake of having more members on the members list. I think, however, that it is important for a member organization to show that they're open for new members, and also explain what the benefits are. Not only the benefits of being a member, but maybe growing a higher number of advocates for the use of domain names, and show how that works, and how they can be part of that business, which is a great business. It gives you recurring revenue. That's what everyone is looking for, and also it can help make domain names more attractive if we have more people, more organizations, more companies taking care. It always gives me a little bit of a headache when I see cars with shared email addresses on it or something, or walled garden websites that they are advertising. So a lot of companies are making themselves dependent on the terms and conditions of the oligopoly of big providers, and domain names give you independence, and we should advocate for that. And if that can be done through education to those that might want to become members on how easy it is, you don't even have to do a lot of things yourselves technically, but you can get infrastructure from other registrars that can manage your membership for you and all that. So there are a lot of opportunities, not only for business, but also for growing our industry and its reputation.
Thank you. And Steve?
So I think there's a part meta answer to this for me. Most people shouldn't have to know about Nominet. That's part of the job of the membership, and them being the registrars and supplying registrants with services. So you need to have a good reason to be a member of Nominet. As the other gentlemen have said, right now that's predominantly because you want to register domains at a discount on behalf of registrants, or maybe for your own portfolio. Now, I think if there was a drive to grow the membership, would have to really show other values and benefits that the membership offering has at Nominet. And I don't think that's super clear at the moment from the outside world. I think sometimes even internally within the membership, it's not clear about which benefits would be useful for your organization. So I think there's a couple of areas where we can further develop in that. I think there's areas in regulation and lobbying or guiding government on regulation, particularly in the UK, where that could be an additional benefit that members should see. Now, that doesn't have to be Nominet doing that themselves. They can partner with other trade associations and lobbying groups such as Tech UK. I think we have to show that wider value of membership if we wanted to grow the membership base. We're at 2,500 members or thereabouts at the present time. That's already quite a significant membership base for the UK.
Thank you. We've had a little follow-up question to something that Thomas said. So if I can put this question to Thomas, but then I'll also obviously invite the other two candidates to comment if they wish as well. So it was just in terms of saying that engagement with members is working, but the sort of challenge back is that we're on a call with 14 people, 4 of which are staff and 3 are candidates. How is that engagement functioning when we have 2,500 members? So if you could perhaps just pick up on that, Thomas, and then I'll invite Steve and David just to add anything if they wanted to.
Yeah, well, it's certainly it would have been good if we had more people here today. But let's not forget, we are recording this, and it will be listened to and watched by many more people. And it is a record that's been produced that's going to be there for perpetuity, or for at least for a while. So we do have means, even though it's always the same with member organizations, that maybe you have 1 out of 100 members that comes in and is very active. But what I've found is that when you talk to members, they, even though you might never see them, they might approach you and say, well, I'm reading your newsletters. I'm following exactly what you're doing, and I like what you're doing. So I think that we shouldn't be frustrated with this being a one-way street in many cases, but with all the communication tools that we have, that we can deploy these days, even if it's unilateral, we should use that. And I think the word will be spread. People will make informed decisions based on the information that is out there. Just flip it around. If there were no information, just the other extreme, people wouldn't have anything to build their decisions on. So I think we have to make offerings, although you might perceive the efforts to be disproportionate. But I think it's always worthwhile engaging, even with a smaller fraction of people. And I value the time that all of you invest today to be with us for this hour. So thank you.
Thank you. Steve, David, anything to add?
I think I'll just add that this is, I think we would love to see more members engaged in events like this. That would be really positive. As Thomas has articulated there are going to be the recordings. There is the members hub where this is. I think there's another aspect to member engagement, which is ensuring there is a wider two-way dialogue. The culmination of the EGM was very evident that there was a large subset of the membership which weren't being listened to by the previous board. And that silence or the unwillingness to listen to that subset of the membership culminated in some fairly significant change at a board level. So I think we definitely need to keep our ear to the ground And it's not just in shared sessions like this or in the community. You know, there's a lot of members that are present at other events globally. I think we need to make sure we're going to be out there and available to them all.
Just to add, I talk to a lot of members in private and always have done, and that continues, and people can always contact me and they know how to contact me if they want to. But I don't believe in making adults and pushing adults who are obviously the Nominet members into doing things they're just not interested in doing at the time. If they want to engage, they'll engage. You put the information there. We've now got the hub, which is great. That's something that came from about 4 or 5 years ago, which I pushed for, and I'm glad we've got. It could be better, but it's better than what we had when we just had emails that were getting lost in people's junk folders. And I think Nominet doing a great job in the engagement factor, and it can't really be expected to do too much more than what it does. Thank you.
Thank you all. Okay, so we're going through some of the pre-submitted questions. So what I'm going to do now is invite anybody on the call if they want to put their hand up using the show hand function in Zoom, and I will bring people in. If you would like to ask a question, if it's the first time, if you could introduce yourself and say who you've come from. Ideally, there'd be questions that the whole panel could answer, but I'm sure the panel members will be happy to answer individual questions. So I will look out for them while we're doing that. I've one other submitted question. I think that was...
Sorry, David. I don't have a hand signal to raise on my screen.
Okay. Do you want to... have you got a question, by the way? I think you have, haven't you?
I've got a couple of questions, actually.
Yeah, go ahead. And then perhaps if you haven't got the hand signal, later on in the call, just send another text and I will invite you back in. So do you want to go ahead with your questions, please?
Okay, I'll go with the first question for now and the second question a little bit later. So
Sure.
The first question, hi, I'm Leslie Bunder. My first question is, and this is to all the candidates, if you are elected, what outreach work will you do afterwards to members, and how will you keep members up to date on the work you are doing as an NED?
Thank you. If I could put that to Thomas, David, and Steve in that order. So Thomas, please, first.
Thanks so much for the question, Leslie. I think I would probably try to make it as easy as possible for folks to liaise with me, and that would be opening a thread in the Members Hub, so that they can ask questions. The answers will be totally legible for all members that are interested, so there wouldn't be any talks behind closed doors. And from that, you know, if there is an appetite for liaising with me on a one-to-one basis, that would be possible, although I would disclose with whom I discuss, or if we can also schedule a Zoom or other platform video call so that that I can offer a platform for discussion. In terms of the work on the board, I think it would be inappropriate for me to make this about me. You know, I can certainly talk about certain positions that I hold, having heard views from members and what I would do there. But I think it's not important what I'm doing, and I should not try to stand out with my own little success stories, if any. But I think you know, I would be a team player on the board and make sure that the board and Nominet shines and not put the spotlight on me.
Thank you. And David?
I pretty much concur with Thomas. When you're on the board, you are a team and you're not there to be grandstanding to anybody or trying to score points against your other board members. And there's a certain level of confidentiality you'd have to keep, otherwise people will not trust you and then they won't like working with you. But as regards outreach to members, I'm always available. I'll make myself available as much as I can through Zoom, video conference, email, instant message, private telephone call, and through my website. And if you want, I'll contribute on the forum, but it depends how many people read the forum these days. Thank you.
Thank you, David. And Steve?
From an outreach perspective, you know, through my time at Links and Tech UK as well, I've shown that I'm pretty available, whether that's via LinkedIn, via email, My mobile number is relatively out there in the industry, so I sometimes do get some evening phone calls, which is just fine by me if I'm not in the middle of doing bedtime with the family. Likewise, I think it's important that all of the directors' contact details are available to the members in the Members Hub. It's an important avenue that members should be able to take issues to the directors. Now, that has to be obviously respected. It has to be a board level type issue that is being raised in that regard, rather than a level of operational issue, with the board being sort of the very final escalation if the response really isn't appropriate. From an update standpoint, you've got a collective responsibility as a board to look out for the interests of the organisation, the employees, and make sure that we're serving the membership well. As the other two have stated, this is collective in the boardroom. I think the strongest element you have, which shouldn't ever be used lightly, is if you significantly disagree with a decision that is being made in the boardroom. As an independent non-executive director, you're very clear showing of having your resignation there if you so vehemently disagree. I'd hope that it would never get to that point. It hasn't in my career thus far. I've used powers of persuasion and discussion to always get to an agreed position that the whole board can get behind. But that's the ultimate at the very far end.
Thank you. I can't see any other hands at the moment. Forgive me for missing anything. Leslie, would you like to come in and ask your second question?
Thank you so much, David. My second question is also one looking at the future of Nominet. In particular, as a member-led organization, what should Nominet be doing to get more members? And what issues do you feel are stopping Nominet from getting new members?
I think we may have covered that one, but I'm going to, I think I asked it earlier, Leslie, but what I'll do is I'll quickly go through the candidates again. David, Steve, and Thomas in that order. If there's anything you'd like to add that we didn't pick up in the previous one.
Yeah. Leslie, can you repeat the first part, please?
Okay, David, thank you. As a member-led organization, what should Nominet be doing to get more members? And what issues do you feel are stopping Nominet from getting new members? So the question, David,
Okay.
David, number one, David B, it's in particular about how do we get new members coming to Nominet?
Thank you.
I think we probably covered that, didn't we, with our question earlier about, well, it depends why you'd want to be a member, and should we be looking to get new members just for the sake of new members? There's got to be a reason to want to be a member, and if there isn't, don't be a member, because you're wasting your time, really, and everybody's time, but you've got to make sure there's a reason to do it. Thank you.
Thanks, David. Steve, anything to add?
No, nothing from my answer earlier. I think there doesn't need to be a drive for expanding the membership over sort of this 2,500. For people who see value in membership, that's great. But likewise, I think as I can't remember it was you, Leslie, who asked at the London Domain Summit, if the Black Swan event was to happen and no one was to have a requirement for .uk anymore, well, there wouldn't be a requirement for Nominet. I think that's very, very unlikely. We've heard about the stories of diversification because domains might become irrelevant. That's somewhat what we hear in the technology industry a lot of the time. 10 years ago, I was told our data centers and co-location is totally irrelevant, but we're still building more data centers than ever, and investments going massive in that way. Hosting companies are going to be irrelevant because of the hyperscalers. Well, there's still brand new hosting companies cropping up. So I think there's definitely a long future for Nominet. I think there's always the ability to continuously improve.
Thank you. And any final comment from Thomas on that one?
Yeah, I think that it is possible that the market for members is actually saturated. That we have reached those that are presently interested in becoming a member, and that those who don't show up actually have no interest in becoming a member and get their domain names as a reseller or something. But I think that the only way to stimulate more membership could probably be to get more interest in domain names. And I've mentioned this earlier, that we need to make sure that folks find domain names attractive. And it always causes me almost physical pain to see QR codes all over the place. That's an opportunity that we've collectively missed, and I would have loved to see domain names wherever we see QR codes, right? So that folks understand the beauty of that. And maybe if Nominet could do something in that regard, partnering up with organizations to educate about the benefits of having your own domain name, your online identity, which you can have forever. I guess that might be a starting point, and then new members might come.
Thank you. And Leslie, apologies if I've caused any confusion by asking your posted question earlier badly, but thank you very much for coming on.
No problems, David. Thank you.
Edward.
Nominet currently gives away a very large amount of money for public benefit, good causes. It's varied over the years, but this has been happening to the tune of millions for several years now, originally through the Nominet Trust, now directly. When it was originally set up, this was because Nominet was making too much profit, as it was a way of disposing of the profit because it can't return it to members. If, given inflation and everything that's happening, Nominet isn't making excessive profits anymore in the future, do you think prices should go up in order to sustain levels of public benefit donations? Or do you think public benefit donations should be cut back in order to keep prices at the level, or as close to the level as possible?
Thanks, Edward. Steve, this is for you first, David, and then Thomas. So, Steve, over to you.
So I think there needs to be a really clear process and policy regarding how Nominet budgets. This is one of the things that I'd be quite keen to advocate on the board. And in looking for that longer term aspect, so we should be in the position to know what the pricing should be 3 years out, what the estimated running costs of the company will be, and what surplus it may potentially generate during that period. Now, when it comes to the sort of the impact of public benefit, there's a lot of work in the social impact side. Ultimately, Nominet is a core technology infrastructure company. I think they could have a greater impact in supporting core technology infrastructure projects that are used by, if not hundreds of millions, but billions of people around the world. I often use the OpenSSL Heartbleed example. OpenSSL is being maintained by a handful of people in the open source community. How much would a small donation to that team, so they could work on it full time, impact all of the global internet infrastructure? So I think there's certainly got to be a bit of realignment. But to answer directly, I think we'd have to have an agreed position on how much of a surplus does the organisation wish to make and support with the membership, and take them on that journey. We've obviously seen it has been quite significant over the years, leading to, I think the investment fund got up to close to 120 million at one point, which is particularly excessive. Alongside that, I think there should be a very clear reserves policy in ensuring that Nominet is planning for its future capital programs. We're obviously aware of the technology transformation project and some of the many millions that are being spent on that. We know in technology there are capital expenditure cycles. We should be able to build those into the budget and ensure that Nominet has that operating cash, so it doesn't have to go out and use financial services or debt to fund those projects. So I think for me, it's very clear on the policy side about budgeting and reflecting that back to the membership.
Thank you. I think I said David, but somebody will correct me if I get that wrong. Thank you.
Hello, Edward. Just nice to meet you face to face, first time. I just want to really hone in on what you asked. I think you were saying about the fact that should public benefit donations be cut if the prices in order to reduce the idea that the prices rise, should costs go up? Am I correct with that? Is that a good summarization of what you were trying to ask? Okay, then in that narrow sphere of, if that was exactly how it was, then the answer for me would be yes. It would be don't. I would cut public benefit donations, and I would focus primarily on the product, which is .uk, which is the reason mostly I am here and what I care about. Something I'll add to that, though, I think we're very lucky with .uk. It's cheap at wholesale. It's a cheap CCTLD compared to another CTLD I work with here in Brazil, which has just gone over 5 million, and it's a growing CCTLD, unlike Nominet's, which is not growing significantly, sadly. And we charge 40 reais here, which is about £6.60, and this is in a country where things cost more and people earn less, and people are prepared to pay for that here. So in all of that scheme, we're lucky that .uk is very cheap. So there's room, although people won't like it, for the price to potentially go up. I don't want that from one side of view. Obviously, I have to pay more, but it's probable that that's going to have to happen in the future. But yeah, I would definitely support focusing the money, if it in that narrow sphere, onto just financing the product, if it made sense overall. And I would cut public benefit donations in that respect. Thank you.
Thank you. And Thomas.
Yeah, thanks so much. Well, that's quite a convoluted question that you've asked, because it's about the cost that the organization incurs. It's about the prices for the product, and it's about the donations that the organization is making. And it really deserves an in-depth discussion of all these 3 points in isolation to give a good answer. But let me try to make this quick. The concept of a CCTLD making donations is as old as we have CCTLDs coming out of primarily universities, right? So they are run by charities or non-for-profit organizations, and the way they operate is they say, okay, we're going to give a little bit back to the community because we don't have to make profits to give to shareholders. And I think that idea is a great one, particularly if you look at the projects that are being that are getting support. I mentioned the IWF earlier. You have educational programs that you support. You have something about online safety and all that. So I think that that's all good, because it creates an environment in which organizations such as Nominet can thrive, right? So if the internet is not sufficiently stable, if we don't have educated users, if they don't know what the DNS or domain names are, then it's a pretty limited target group, and we want a broader target group to which domain investors, for example, can sell their products, or stuff like that. In terms of price, I would always be very cautious to tweak prices for domain names, because if you overdo it, if you make them too cheap, it will attract bad actors, and also you destroy the reputation of a zone, which can easily be done. I mean, look at .tk and others that really don't have a good reputation. And if the reputation of a TLD goes down, the investment in domain names is not attractive. And we want to create value not only for portfolio owners, but also for those who might want to invest in a premium name and have their valuable place of virtual real estate, right? That's the way I look at things, So we want to preserve that, and cheap prices don't always help that. The opposite, I guess, is the case. The third pillar is cost. I think that having an organization that is a critical infrastructure, you need good people. You might not need the highest paid people, but you need very good people that know their game in order to make sure that everything's run properly. And we need to pay them well, right? So the question is not like trying to cut the cost base by trying to look for cheaper staff or outsourcing to lower cost jurisdictions. But the question that you might ask is, And I think that you've had this discussion ramping up to the extraordinary general meeting. Is Nominet sufficiently focusing on its core business, or is it spending on things that it shouldn't be doing? Is it starting to compete too much with its own members and all that? So I think we always need to make sure that the core functionalities are run in an impeccable fashion. And then we have to be very conservative in adding to that and doing other things. But I think if you answer those three things correctly or appropriately, then I think there will always be room for donations. But certainly the level of donations depends on the other two factors. So if the organization is constantly under attack, let's say, you need to ramp up the security investment and stuff like that. But I hope you get the idea that these are three pillars that freely correlate with each other.
Thank you, Thomas, and thank you for the question, Edward. Did you have any follow-up from?
No, that's great, thanks.
And related to that, and a question from Dan, what's your take on Nominet being a public benefit company instead of not-for-profit, which is how Nominet referred to itself in the past? Should Nominet go back to seeing itself as a not-for-profit? And this is Steve, if you'd lead us out again, and then Thomas, and then David. So public benefit company, not-for-profit, should it go back to seeing itself as a not-for-profit?
So I think I mentioned the London Domain Summit. If you ask the three candidates here to have a debate on public benefit, we'd probably come up with 50 different definitions of public benefit. I think by running .uk, that is a benefit to the whole of the UK and all registrants. So from that definition, it's quite clear there is definitely a benefit there. I think importantly, though, it should be run with the principles of a not-for-profit. And that's key to the organization. Just referring to how Thomas answered the last question and some of those key elements, we are in a fortunate position that Nominet is well funded. It has a very good team, even though there's some areas for improvement. Now, it's also important, as I said, on the policy of budget setting, not-for-profit also means not for loss. You need to keep your eye on the commercial ball and ensure that the organization is being run effectively and is maximizing the output for the membership and all registrants, and ensuring that we deliver a super reliable service. Nominet is regulated, is an operator of an essential service, so it is under government regulation already. And I think it's key that we operate that to a world-class standard. I think also importantly, as I touched on earlier, Nominet should be the world-leading CCTLD, and that's not just in the technology space, but in the policy space. There should be a team that is really forward-looking within Nominet, both on the technology side and the policy side. And if we think back to the earlier mid-2000s, where Nominet was on the world stage, driving standards at the IETF and driving RFCs, I'd like to see some of that innovation brought back to Nominet, and Nominet being there as the organization that is well trusted, well respected, and well known.
Thank you, Thomas.
To be quite honest, that's something that I wouldn't want to die in the ditch for. But I do like the public benefit label. The question is, how do we live up to the expectations coming with it? But I think that keeping an eye on not just not making profits, you can inflate your cost base so that you will never make a profit and look good as a non-for-profit, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you're serving the wider public. So I think that with that label comes some responsibility, and I think that it is appropriate for an organization such as Nominet to try to live up to the best possible standards in that regard.
And David.
I'd pretty much concur with that. I think it's very difficult to actually run a true not-for-profit, and I think I prefer the public benefit label of how Nominet works. I think it's an easier thing to deal with because Nominet's always going to make some kind of profit. It can't always know its costs in advance anyway. And what should it do if it overcharges people because it made its costs were lower than expected? So I'd stick with the public benefit. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question, Leslie.
Thank you, David. A question for all the candidates. If elected, you will become a board member. One aspect of becoming a board member is you will be sitting on a number of committees. Can you advise myself as a member, and indeed other members, what committees, say for two of them, would be your strong point to be part of, and why?
Thank you, Leslie. So this one will be Thomas, if you could lead out on this one, followed by David and Steve. So the question really, which of the board committees would you want to be on, and what's the your kind of reason for wanting to be on those committees? Thomas. Thomas, forgive me, I think we were both muted there, but you're still muted. So if you would like to start again, thank you.
No, it was just me failing to unmute properly. I was just saying that I'm just checking on the website which of the committees NED currently has in place. Maybe you can help me with that. Because I think it's not only a question of what would I like to do, but also where is my expertise best placed, and who is on what committees, or who plans to be on what committees as we compose the board at the AGM and subsequently.
No problem.
I think that
Thomas, leave me with just 1 second, and I will clarify for everybody what the board committees are.
Yeah, I can read them out. I found the website as well. So it's the
okay, thank you.
So it's the Audit and Risk Committee, the Code of Conduct Committee, the Investment Committee, the Nominations Committee, the Public Benefit Committee, and the Remuneration Committee. And I have previously been chair of the Audit Committee in another role, so that's something that I would probably offer to also being part of a Remuneration Committee previously. But if I had a choice, I would probably go for the Code of Conduct Committee.
Thomas, I think we might be losing your connection for a second. What I'll do, if that's okay, David, is I'll move the question on to you, and then with a bit of luck, we'll get Thomas back. Or is it me?
Is it me? I think it's
David, if you'd like to
okay.
lead out, and then Thomas, I'll come back to you. Your connection just dropped out for a minute. I'll come back to you at the end in case we missed anything there. Thanks, David.
Past experience, I was on remuneration and I was on nominations. Code of Conduct Committee is one that just pops up very occasionally, as some of you may know. So it's not really one that you sit on all the time. But the one I would probably choose, it was known as Audit and Governance. If I could have the choice, I would pick that one. I was on that for the last 6 months when I was on the board, and it was interesting. I felt I could contribute a lot to that. So if I had to just pick one, it would certainly be that one.
Thank you. Steve?
My natural place in this would be Audit and Risk Committee. I chaired the Audit and Risk Committee at Links once we'd established that as a subcommittee of the board. And I've got a lot of experience both in audit work in financial and governance and compliance, as well as specific background in risk management and risk policy. Likewise, I've got experience on remuneration committees, both from my executive and non-executive experience. And I think based on where we are with the public benefit discussions, I'd be very keen to join that committee, if possible, in order to voice and bring my viewpoint to that subcommittee. I think importantly, though, there would have to be a skills analysis across the board to see where the skill set that I have and other board members are. We can create the best subcommittees from the cross-section of the boards, I think is really a key aspect to that.
Thank you, Thomas. I'm sorry about that. We got 2/3 of it, so we heard the main bulk of what you had to say, but then you just broke out towards the end. So if there was anything there you just needed to add or clarify, then please go ahead.
And since I don't know when I dropped out, I have experience as a chairman of the audit committee, and I was on the remuneration committee in other capacities. I've heard from David that the code of conduct committee doesn't have too much regular work. So, whilst that's something that I would like to contribute to, I would then probably opt for the public benefit and the investment committee.
Thank you. Another pre-submitted question, not committees, but council this time. So a question relating to the UK RAC. So what role do you see the UK RAC playing in Nominet overall currently? And what would you like to see the UK RAC address in future? And that one, David, Steve, and then Thomas, please.
Just repeat that one more time, please. Thank you.
Sure. So this is in relation to the UK RAC. What do you see what role do you see the UK RAC playing in Nominet overall currently, and what would you like to see the UK RAC address in future?
I'm a bit familiar with that. So it's an elected committee, isn't it? And comes from the membership. If you don't know, members vote for other members to be on it. One vote per member, I believe. It's not weighted voting. Right. I think, well, at the moment, I think they're spending a lot of time reviewing various possible policies in the future or ideas. The expired domains one is one that they're heavily involved with, and I have no issue that they're involved with that. I think it's a good thing because I think it's quite a significant thing for people to get their teeth into. It just depends what comes along, really. You can't predict it, but it's good for it as an advisory board. Obviously, it's not the main board, but it can advise the existing board at Nominet what's going on and what they should do. But I have no problem with how it's run as it is. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Steve.
I think we should start by congratulating Rex, who's just been elected the chair of the UK RIC. So they are now chairing themselves. I think that's now a real positive for them. I think it's really important that we have a very clear policy development process that is able to take the feedback of not just the UK RIC, but a clear method for members to input to the UK RIC, so that it's understood about the purpose and roles and responsibilities. I think from my impression that they've been working on quite a number of different topics since they were formed. I think sometimes there is potentially a too narrow a focus for the UK RAC, and I believe that they potentially would like to widen the scope slightly. I think that would be a worthwhile investigation. Each of the individual elected members there are spending probably a considerable amount of their own personal time to dedicate to the interests of Nominet and the Nominet membership. And from discussions with a few of the UK RAC members, sometimes they're putting aside their own personal views quite considerably, or their own commercial views about what we for the greater good of Nominet and the overall membership. So I think in summary, I think it's being very clear about the policy development process. I think making sure they're getting the appropriate support and potentially reviewing the scope and ensuring that everything that they would like to cover is within scope.
Thank you. Thomas.
Yeah, I'd like to offer 3 concrete suggestions as to what the committee might be looking into. That's the upcoming sub-pro subsequent procedures with ICANN, the next round of new GTLDs, where Nominet will for sure offer its services as an RSP, and the conditions under which and how it's going to offer that, whether it's going to partake in the pre-accredited RSP program. Those things I think deserve a consultation with this group. Second point would be NIS2. Even though after Brexit, you might say that NIS2 is nothing that you need to be concerned about. You may have heard of this infamous Article 28 of the NIS2 directive, which requires registries, registrars, and other entities offering domain name registrations, which would be resellers and privacy and proxy service providers as well, to maintain a database of accurate registration data, to offer public whois service, to respond to disclosure requests from legitimate access seekers, and most importantly and most challengingly, validate the accuracy of registration data. And we're currently facing the risk of a fragmented transposition of this directive into national laws in the EU member states. So, and combine that with the differences between the various CCTLD models under which CCs operate and the G world, on the other hand, we might see considerable fragmentation in the marketplace. And I think that Nominet should be part of the discussion on how responsibilities can be shared between the players so that we can provide for a pleasant user experience. When it comes to validation, for example, that users don't have to follow as many different procedures as they have put domain names into their shopping cart, but also to make sure that liability risks are manageable. And the third point would be DNS abuse. DNS abuse is the regulator's favorite toy, and whilst the CC community has not been willing to touch it for quite a while, because they said, okay, all the issues lie with the GTLDs. Your own Nick Wenman-Smith is now the chair of the Standing Committee on DNS Abuse in the CCNSO, and we can expect regulatory pressure to increase over time because regulators don't necessarily understand the difference between websites and domain names, and they think it's quite convenient to just have domain names suspended if there's something wrong with web space. And knowing that for example, a lot of phishing campaigns are conducted via compromised web space. You can validate the heck out of registrants. You won't solve that issue. So that's to say that we need to keep an eye on that and talk about ways to decrease, mitigate DNS abuse. The common definition would be phishing, farming, malware, botnets, and spam to the extent that it's used for the above four, and educate about the role of a registry in that. So I think those are areas where consultation with this group would also be very valuable.
Thomas, thank you very much. Okay, next question, Leslie.
Thank you, David. A question for all three candidates regarding .wales domain extension. What would you do, or what would you advise the board to do with regards to .wales? And should Nominet have an office like it used to in Wales for the local community there for that extension?
Thanks, Leslie. Could you just expand on the background of what to do with .wales?
I'd like to hear directly from the candidates. They should be aware of .wales. Maybe they can tell us what they know about it and what they think its future is and what it means.
Thank you. On my sheet, I have this is Steve, Thomas, and David. So, Steve, would you be able to take this one, please?
Of course. So I think from the viewpoint of having an office, I think the world has changed quite considerably. I'm not sure an office is necessarily a dedicated requirement now. I think what's more important is the local intelligence from the community supporting .wales. And I think that's a key thing rather than just an office, and making sure, again, it's appropriately resourced. From the view of should Nominet be supporting .wales? Should it be the registry for .wales? Well, yes, of course. I think within the UK, that encompasses obviously England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. So I think that is a really important facet to it, and I would continue to support it in that regard.
Thank you, Steve. Thomas.
Now, I'm a big fan of GeoTLDs, to be quite honest, and only the day before yesterday and on Monday, I had the privilege of talking about NIS2, coincidentally, to the members of the GeoTLD group. I think that GeoTLDs, and the first one that comes to mind is .cat, where a lot of folks have said, well, the registration numbers of .cat are negligible. Why are they doing all that? But if you take a closer look, you will find that this space has actually been the home for the digital identity for an entire community. You find a much higher proportion of unique content on those domain names under .cat as you would under others. So I think we need to support and even stimulate local and regional TLDs. It's the same for .paris, where AFNIC is doing the RSP. And so I think it's appropriate for Nominet to be the RSP for .wales and a couple of others. It doesn't take a lot to put another string on your registry backend. So I think that shouldn't be the issue. I think we should look at the overall mission of Nominet, and that I think should include to allow for regional identities and for folks to have their virtual home online. How much needs to be invested? How many dedicated individuals should be working for that? It would be premature for me to say. I don't know the cost structure with that, but I think that a measured approach to support and promote the .wales TLD is warranted.
Thank you, and David.
So I was just looking at the registry stats for that. I think 13,000 registered to .wales and about 8,000 registered to Cymru. And I think the reason probably that Nominet went for those GTLDs all those years ago was because it would likely have not wanted anybody else to have got them instead, given it ran .uk. So it had them, and it had considerable costs in getting them, which I think it was £185,000 per TLD back then. So I'd like to see eventually the money paid back for the costs of acquiring the extensions. But as regards running an office or anything, I don't think on those registration numbers you're going to justify it, and I don't think putting an office is going to double or triple those registration numbers either. And you've got to think about, well, how much is it going to cost? Can you still hear me? Okay. So no, I'd probably work out how best to spend the money that we earn from it in maintaining the numbers or trying to grow them to as reasonable extent as possible. I don't think you should sell the extension. I don't think Nominet should sell the extension or anything like that, but keep an eye on the market and see whether it makes sense to continue running it in the way it runs, or see what else comes along. I don't think there's more else you can do. Thank you.
Thank you. Leslie, were you coming back in there? Did you have any follow-up there, or shall I move us on?
Hi, David. Yeah, sorry. I think that sort of covered it. I mean, potentially the follow-up then is, do you think Nominet should also then potentially get .london or apply to become the registry for .london?
I'll answer that. You can't, because it's already owned by somebody. You can't just take that and it's back-ended by somebody else. In fact, Nominet, I believe, did run it for a while when Minds and Machines existed, and did the back end for it. But you can't just take something that belongs to somebody else. And I don't think it would make sense to buy it. In fact, it's sponsored by London and Partners, which is something to do with the London Authority, I presume. So I don't.
But if it's retendered, David, but if it was retendered,
what do you mean by retendered? What in what sense? The back end or
the back end? Yes.
Well,
yes.
Maybe if they probably would pitch for it. And I said that they did have it when Minds and Machines ran it, but now it's at Central Nick. Again, it depends whether I don't know how good Nominet's back-end registry is compared to any others, because I'm not a GTLD wanting to look for comparing back-end providers. So it would depend on how significant Nominet's back-end provisions are in the future to attract people to want to work with them versus anybody else.
Thanks, David. There's a related question coming about would candidates support Nominet acquiring .scot if the opportunity arises? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask Thomas and then Steve if they've got any comments on the .london and the follow-up question from Leslie related to .scot, and then David, I'll just loop back to you again at the end if there's anything specific on .scot. So Thomas, if you'd like to just comment or not on that last conversation.
Yeah, I think we should make a distinction between the actual registry operator that has filed the application or now owns the TLD and the registry service provider. So for those geographic TLDs that have been applied for with ICANN, the applicant needed to provide a letter of non-objection or a letter of support from the competent authorities. So we have to assume that unless the relationship went sour, that the current registry operators do have the blessing of the city, of the region, of the country, as the case may be. And typically those are long-term relationships, and I think it would be difficult to obtain and get assigned a registry agreement with ICANN from those. Certainly, Nominet should try to compete with other registry service providers to provide the technical backend. David, you mentioned that Minds and Machines has been operating .london. Now it's with Centronic, but these contracts go out for tender every now and then. And as Nominet did in the past, it will surely throw in a bid for those names, as it should, particularly for the ones that are domestic.
Thank you, Steve. Any comments on those?
I think it has to watch its face. So I think this is one of the key aspects of Nominet offering its registry backend services. It has to be very clear that it's a worthwhile thing for the organisation to be doing, and ultimately that's benefiting the members, and we're not subsidising from .uk into other areas in that regard. So it sort of comes back to that pricing, budgeting, and cost analysis area.
Thank you. David, did you want to comment on .scot?
I've always supported Nominet doing back-end registry extensions, but that would be on the basis that it was still a competent provider and still providing current services that people wanted, up to date, and a product and an offering that was likely to be successful. I wouldn't want Nominet bidding for extensions or for back-end operations and constantly losing. I think at a certain point where you'd go, well, maybe we're not offering, and this is hypothetical, you're not offering what the market wants, and you should maybe step away from it or rethink your expertise and your offerings compared to what else is out there, if that's what other people hypothetically were going for. Other than that, I would be supportive of Nominet bidding for .london as a back-end provider, or .scot, or anything else that was relevant, as long as it was competent and able to do that, and it didn't have any bad effects on .uk, which I can't see that it would. Thank you.
Thank you. Time's nearly up. We've got a few minutes left. I did want to make sure that every of the candidates has a chance to make a closing comment. We probably can't squeeze any more questions in, but if anybody had a burning question that they wanted to ask that was a quick answer, I'd be very happy to take it. Otherwise, let's get into closing statements. Can't see any hands. Great. In which case, we're nearly there. If you would like candidates to make one very brief closing statement on why members should consider voting for you, I'd ask you to keep this to 30 seconds, if that's possible. That's the kind of impact we're looking for, if I may. And we'll go back to the original order, which was I'll ask Thomas first, David, and then Steve. So, Thomas, the mic is yours. Thomas, you're muted again, and so was I.
So yeah, sorry for that. I've unmuted now. I hope you can hear me. And I was just saying that you might not expect a tongue-in-cheek cheap comment from a German, but it doesn't get any better than me, you know. So if you want someone with decades of expertise in the G space, the CC space, hybrid organizations that live in both worlds, registrars and resellers, that has a corporate as well as non-for-profit background with board experience, you should vote for me. And you know, I'm a lifer, domain industry lifer. I'm really passionate about this, and I would hope that you allow for me to put my expertise at the fingertips of Nominet. Thank you.
Thank you, David.
Hello, I'll be brief. I've been working in the industry for more than 20 years. I have some experience with Nominet, and I know what I'm talking about in respect of secondary market. If you're in that area, you should seriously consider voting for me because I represent a lot of what you do. But I also understand that we have a part to play with the larger registrar operators as well, and I've worked with them, and I think I make a great candidate to be on the board. Thank you.
Thank you. And Steve?
I think firstly, you're probably watching this on the re-record if you're not present. So first things first, just vote. You know, I'd much prefer if you voted for me first, as your preference, but I'm sure Thomas and David would both say the same. I bring 20 years of executive and non-executive experience to the board. I've managed large teams, grown businesses, and I've always had an eye on what's for the good of the internet in the UK, through my time at Links, through my time at Tech UK. So I think I bring a well-rounded set of skills, both from a commercial aspect and looking at the wider not-for-profit UK benefit aspect. So please vote for me as your first preference.
Great, thank you all very much. It's been a really wide-ranging discussion. I've really enjoyed listening to some of the answers. Thank you very much to each of the candidates for joining. I wish you all the best of luck in the upcoming election. And of course, the biggest thank you to our members for joining and contributing to this and for making it happen. We will be putting this recording live as soon as possible on the hub. And remember, voting opens on the 20th. To echo what's been said, I think everybody would like as many members to participate in the votes as possible. So good luck, everybody, and thank you, everybody, for joining. We will see you at the next event or at the AGM. Thank you again. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.